All right, welcome back for our 27th league, which is Ultimatum. So with Ultimatum, we added a bunch of new uniques, a bunch of new div cards. We added Ritual to the core game. The Maven will now only witness encounters. The Alias Cannot Die aura was removed and replaced with a Benevolent Guardian Nemesis modifier, which has been added to, which causes the monsters with this modifier to apply an immunity buff to nearby allies for a short duration. If the original monster is slain, affected allies lose the immunity buff. Other monsters that have the Nemesis modifier cannot be given the immunity buff. So that part was nice. I still think blanket immunity is a lazy, it's a lazy game design. Even though I understand why they do it that way. Rare monsters dominated by Cirrus have had their attack, cast speed, and movement speed lowered, and that was mainly due to the fact that they were just destroying people. For our Xena mods, we have Fortune Favors the Brave, Essence, Breach, Bloodlines, Ambush, Harbinger, Heist, Harvest. And in Ultimatum, the other thing that was big is this was the league where they nerfed Harvest substantially from Ritual. Like Ritual was Uber Harvest, and this was the Harvest we know now. So it costing 12C was kind of sad. I think they thought that Harvest would be better, even post-nerf, than it is. So in Ultimatum, in the league, the Trial Master offers the Trials of Chaos, where you must battle against a wave of monsters in an enclosed area with a dangerous modifier added to earn a reward. With each win, you can either claim your prize or start a new wave with an additional modifier added on it for bigger and better rewards. But if you lose, all of the rewards you've obtained are lost. That's actually a cool mechanic. And I wish more leagues were more, not necessarily as min-maxy, but there was a risk to the reward more so than there is in the standard version of the game. In the hardcore version of the game, there's always the risk of death. In the standard version of the game, since the risk of death is basically an experience loss, and is not a huge penalty, it is at late levels, but it's not at early levels. So I wish there was more things that had this kind of a mechanic where it made it where it's better for you if you play the game the way they're wanting you to play it, instead of playing it the way that you may automatically play it or prefer to play it. The Trial Master and an altar spawns in zones. The altar displays a reward, the objective, and 3 modifiers to choose from. The player must select a mod before beginning the trial. There are 4 possible objectives: defeat waves of enemies, survive, stand in stone circles, protect the altar. Now, the one thing I would suggest if they are going to make this core is you literally just make it the defeat the waves of enemies. You take out the other 4 because that part of gameplay is boring. Like waiting on the timer to run out or standing in circles is not engaging AARPG gameplay. Defeating waves of enemies are. Once you complete a wave, you will be given 2 choices in the trial and receive your rewards, or start another wave by selecting a new modifier to add. The uniques added Moxel's Machination, I probably am butchering that, Glimpse of Chaos, Hate Forge, which will be really cool to see getting added back into the game. I think we're supposed to get Hate Forge back because Hate Forge was huge. Yomax Accord, Relic of the Pack, and Temptation Step. Then here is the links for the Ultimatum League, the Trials of Chaos, as well as the Trial Master, which is pictured below in case you did not play Ultimatum League. That way you can find out more information about all of those. Reception and implementation. Ultimatum was kind of a mixed reception, mostly due to the similarity to Ritual League, and it was back to back. So we had Ritual League and then Ritual 2.0 right afterwards. Impy was also banned for finding and reporting an exploit in the game mechanic. So they found that if you stood outside Impy and his group, they play 6-man parties specifically at the start of every league. And they really have it down to a science at this point of making ridiculous amounts of currency and figuring out the best strategy for doing this. GGG had up to this point not banned people very often for exploiting mechanics, especially when only done 2 times and reporting it. So this was kind of a change of pace in Grinding Gear Games philosophy. I don't know if it was a good idea not to announce that they were changing the philosophy before they did. Because up until this point, you were basically encouraged to exploit it by most streamers. I'm not going to say all, because there were some that were very against it anyway. But most streamers were encouraging you to exploit things. 1, because it got them views, and 2, because there wasn't a reason not to exploit it and to take advantage of the system. And I think what happened is at this point, Grinding Gear Games just had enough with the let's encourage people to exploit things mechanic, and that idiom from especially like people that are essentially making a living off of the game. And with that change in ship, I think it's a good thing for the health of the game long term, right? Like, I think it's a good idea that you aren't encouraged to exploit the game. And I think it's a good idea that we're banning people and removing the currency through ill-gotten gains, I guess would be the best way of phrasing it. But earning that currency through an exploit, I think it's a good thing that that currency is out of circulation, right? I think that's good for the health of the economy. However, I don't think you necessarily ban the guy that tells you that's the bug. Like, because, okay, so here's the thing with 2 times, right? If you test it once and it works, you're not sure if it was a glitch or if it's actually the way it's designed. So if you are a tinker, right, and you think about mechanics, you want to see if the same thing is replicatable again, or if it was just a bug, like a one-time temporary bug. Because if that was the case, then it's not actually an exploit. You don't know it's an exploit until you test a second time and have the exact same results. That is like basic scientific method. So I don't think Impy's group should be banned or should have been banned for this, even though I am glad that they're putting their foot down more. But I don't think you punish the people that report it. I think you punish the people that do it after it was reported, if that makes sense. Like, I think because you have to have a group of your community that is actively looking for things to exploit and is telling you this is probably an exploit. You should look into this. You want that from your community because it helps you internally fix your own problems. So what Impy did is did GGG's job for them, and they essentially punished it for him. Now, I understand the business of both sides of this, right? On Impy's side, he's going to get a lot of views if he keeps exploiting it, right? He's going to get a lot of views because it was ridiculous currency that he was dropping. On the flip side, it's really bad that that's being showed to 2,500 people. I don't know how many people watch those videos, but everybody that watched those videos, like, it's bad that it was out there and it was being showcased. That part is bad. And so I think it's good that they're stopping that part of the exploitation, where we're not encouraging it. We're going to say that it's a bug, and we're going to say that, hey, we're going to ban people for it. Right? I think it's good, but I think you have to have an in-game message pop up as soon as you're made aware of this that says the server's growing offline in, 10 minutes or whatever, and we will ban anyone using the Ultimatum bug or the Ultimatum exploit. Call it an exploit at that point, and say that we're going to ban everyone using this from this point forward. I think you have to be very clear, and I think you have to be very decisive when announcing these things, because I don't think it's Impy's fault that he found an exploit and reported it. I don't think that's his fault. Now, I don't know the history. If they kept doing it over and over and over again after reporting it, then that's probably worth banning over. But if the stance is, we want you to find an exploit, because the game does want you to find the exploits for them. They just don't want you to keep abusing the exploit, right? We want you to find the exploit, report it to us so we can fix it, right? That should be a game dev's priority, is we want you to find it so we can fix it, so we can make our game better, right? That should be the mentality. And we shouldn't punish people who use the scientific method and confirm that, yes, this is indeed an exploit. I was able to replicate it twice, a second time, and it did the exact same thing. So this is indeed an exploit. This is how we did it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, line by line. Like, this is how we did it. And then we as a company are going to make a message. At this time, we are aware of the issue. It is considered an exploit, and we will ban anyone from this point forward using it. And you put it as a broadcast message. And it goes out to all players. It goes out on Twitter. It goes up on your main page. And you make it very transparent that this is now considered an exploit, and we will ban people. You don't ban people, I don't think, without making those very clear distinctions of, this is indeed an exploit. We are fixing it. We're taking the servers down to fix it. And it should be that quick. It should be, we are pulling the servers down to fix it. Anyone banning it at this point in time, or if it's going to take some time for you to fix that particular problem, because you have to go through all the code to fix it, then it needs to say, we will now ban people using this. We're going to put some kind of tracking mechanism up to this mechanic, right? And you should be able to do something that will let you track who is exploiting it. And that way you have a clear ban process. There has to be some way of tracking this, and some kind of flag that you can iterate, and you pull the servers down, you put the flag on, you pull the servers back up, and you start banning people that are exploiting. That's how it should be handled. And I think that's the correct form. And I think if GGG does that, their PR is in a much better place. And Bex is a lot happier because she's not having to put out another fire, because she does a wonderful job with our community. And so does Chris Wilson also. Like, we forget how awesome it is that when things went bad, and I'll talk about this more in Expedition, but when things went bad, and when things have gone bad in the past, Chris Wilson has come out of the shadows, because he's a busy guy. He runs the thing, right? He's a busy guy, but he has come out of the shadows and really interacted with the player base, which is very different than how most companies' head guy operate. And I'm very, very happy that Chris Wilson, even though we may not always agree on the best course of action for Path of Exile, we have the same goal, which is to have the best game possible, right? We have the exact same vision for the game. We just have two different viewpoints which is perfectly fine, right? It's perfectly fine to have different viewpoints, but when your goal is the same, we at least have a set of core principles that we are trying to keep afloat, which is good, which is what you want from a developer, because a lot of developers these days don't seem like they care about their game at all. And it's nice to have a studio that does like genuinely care about their game. And it is very much still a passion project, as you can tell when Chris talks about it. This is like his life's work. So when people are critical of it, I understand, like one is he is very graceful about approaching criticism, which is something that we can all learn from. Like, we could all be as graceful as Chris Wilson is when approaching criticism, which how he approaches criticism is he just basically says what his point of view is. He basically acknowledges the criticism and he says, here's what we're thinking. And I wish that Chris Wilson would have more of a public face than he does. Like, I wish Chris Wilson would come out when things are going good, and not necessarily to the same degree as when things are going bad. But when things are going good, I think Chris Wilson should come out and kind of mildly hype the next league in the middle of this league, right? So like when Scourge was pretty positively received over the first 3 weeks, Chris Wilson should have come out and said something like, made a short video or appeared on a stream with Ziz or somebody, and have it shorter, because it doesn't need to be long form. It doesn't need to be a million questions. It needs to be, hey, I want to come on your stream and I want to do a little bit of spoilers, like mild spoilers for next league, and talk about like what you guys genuinely think about the league, if you're enjoying it. Are these changes helpful? And if he took that approach with it, and even if it was just setting up one podcast or one, like, I think a podcast probably isn't the best. I think the best is like the interview, like the Q&As at the end of the stream is good, but I think there should be a follow-up Q&A after we've actually experienced the league and have some point of reference in. Maybe I think you have to alternate that. Like, I don't think it can't be the same person every time, right? You don't want it to be just Ziz that gets that, or just Ziggy, or just whoever, right? You want to alternate it. And I would say, like, pick 30 different streamers that play the game differently, right? I would really like to hear an Octavian and Chris Wilson interview, because I think Octavian thinks about the game in a very different way than basically everybody. And hearing his viewpoints with Chris Wilson is a lot different than hearing Ziz's viewpoints, because Ziz kind of represents the more meta tryhardy group of the community, and he does some great things for new players too, but his kind of more of his core seems to be like the higher end people. And I could be wrong. I don't know his demographics, but it seems to be that group. Or maybe he's just turned the lower end people into that people. Who knows? But I think having it being different people every time is good and is healthy, because different people have different viewpoints, and we may spark some. It also shows variety. And I understand, like, chasing the big ones, like whatever gets the most views. I understand the logistics side of, I can only do one of these, but you're going to get views just because you're Chris Wilson and you're having an interview with a PoE streamer. Like, I could have an interview with Chris Wilson and it would blow up. And it's not because of me. It would be because I'm talking with Chris Wilson. if that makes sense. Like it would just blow up because Chris Wilson has that effect in this community. And so I get the reach dynamic of it, but there's also a dynamic that is like genuinely you will drive it. And here's the other thing. If you don't think the YouTube video alone will drive it, put it on your webpage. Put a link to the video on your webpage of that specific YouTube video. That's perfectly fine. Especially if you're answering questions about Path of Exile. Like that content, like either that or maybe you take a note from like what Digital Extremes has done, and maybe you do like an in-house podcast. Maybe like at this point, normally, where the league is not done yet. So like probably at like the 2.5 month mark where the league is not done yet, you may come on, you may show some concept art of something that you're working on. You kind of give a little bit of insight without really spoiling much of anything. And maybe you show some like PoE 2 development, but you just make like an in-house grinding your games podcast with some of the dev team, and you make it like an hour-long show and you throw it up on your Twitch account. But doing that would really, really go a long way to, and it doesn't have to be Chris Wilson, right? It can be different people from the community and take chat questions, right? Like have someone read chat, probably like Bex, have Bex read through chat and give you, you know, things to answer or questions to ask you guys to answer while you're doing it. And it can be a live stream, or the questions can be for next time. If you did it a live stream, obviously you get a little bit more PR-y, and you would need a different team. But I think that level of marketing would do wonders for the Path of Exile community. And I think it would hopefully have a better synergy of representation between the different groups and Path of Exile, where everybody felt like they had a voice. And maybe even if our vision isn't the same for implementation, maybe we give you a very unique perspective as a thing to kind of latch onto and to think about doing differently, right? Like even though like I might say something which won't ever be implemented, but it's a cool concept, and maybe they think of a different way to make that concept work in the game itself. And that is something that's just really good for the community all in all. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you on the next one. Have a great day, Exiles.